Hello and welcome to this watercolor painting session. I'm excited to finish painting my illustration that I started some time ago. I thought it would be helpful to show you my full process and take you through step by step creating my illustration. I'll include the initial sketches, how I paint with my watercolors, some of the tips and tricks I use, plus mistakes I made and how I fix them. I bought a nice new set of Professional Winsor Newton watercolors. I decided to swatch them before I started painting so you could see the colors that I'm using throughout the illustration. This is Winsor Newton's pre-assembled set of 12 half-pan watercolor paints in a really nice mixing tin. They are professional level and as such are one of the best performing watercolors. The fine pigments create brilliant permanent colors and they have amazing transparency and layer so beautifully. Having said that, a less expensive student-grade watercolor set will serve you almost as well if you want a more affordable option. The brushes I'm using are the Princeton Velvet Touch No. 6 and 4 round, the Gold Sable No. 6 and 2, and also the Princeton Aqua Elite 12 round and 4 long round. The Princeton brushes are really nice to work with. As I mentioned before, I had previously started my illustration. After doing a few thumbnails in my sketchbook, I finalized my drawing and transferred it onto my paper, adding in any other details or changes that I thought were necessary. I then started to go in with light washes of watercolor to create the base for the painting. I added some darker layers to define the shadows and light while choosing my colors. And now we're at the stage where I'm going to finish painting my illustration and show you how I do that. So far, I have most of the illustration covered with a layer of light paint. Now I'm going back in and adding additional layers of paint over top so that I can create more dimension and depth, so that the shadows are accentuated, and to build the forms out within the painting. At this point, I'm really wanting to strengthen the intensity of the color, so I've loaded my brush with a lot of pigment for the cane. As I do this, I also start adding more details to make the candy look more realistic and yummy. I'm building the color, the light and shadow, and defining the shapes. I want the candy to look really delicious. I'm slowly building the fire up and creating flames specifically to make it look like it's really roaring in the background. As I'm approaching the witch's bonnet, I want to leave it white, but still define its shape, the shadows, and highlights. I'm doing this by using specific colors such as grays, yellows, blues, and purples. Again, I'm darkening up the illustration with a less watered down paint, but brushing it quickly over the existing layers so that I don't wash away any of the defining colors, textures, and details that I've already painted. Because this watercolor is so transparent, but has such nice vibrancy, it really gives the painting so much depth and detail. Again, I'm really going in with even more pigment and darker colors now to highlight the grain in the wood and create some shadows and contrast behind the mushrooms. I'm continuing to brighten and layer colors. The paper I'm using is actually not a watercolor paper. It's a paper that I personally prefer to use sometimes with this style of illustration that I'm doing. It's the Strathmore Bristol 300 series 100 pound or 270 GSM paper. I had a lot of fun creating this witch character for my illustration. I wanted her to look scary and creepy, especially because I created the kids in the scene to be basically completely oblivious to her intentions. Hansel is a little skeptical but still curious, and Gretel is just completely enthralled with the prospect of free candy. I also added some fun details in the background to continue the story too. I'm continuing to build up more color and contrast around the fire, adding a layer of an orange-brown over the dark shadows to create more reflection of the fire. I'm also detailing the bubbly brew the witch has cooking in her pot. I'll let you watch in peace for a minute here. I've added an orange glow to the top of the table, and now I'm painting in a dark shadow along the side of the table to help define the edges. I'm using a pretty wet wash for this shadow, as I want to cover the area with a similar value. Although it's a little closer to the fire than it would be in reality, I want this shadow here for a few reasons. It allows for some contrast that I want behind Gretel, it breaks up the floor in the cottage, and it helps to add atmosphere to the illustration as I paint in the long cast shadows from the bones on the floor. Yes, another fun creepy detail if you haven't noticed them yet. I really love adding small details like that where you don't notice right away, but they're part of the visual journey as you look through the illustration. Here I'm wanting to fix the table leg. I changed the chair previously, and now I need to shorten the table leg so that it's in perspective and dimensionally equal to the chair. I did this so that it pushes the furniture back a bit, further into the background. This is one of the great things I love about watercolor. I just wet my brush, make sure it's nice and clean, and gently scrub off the paint. I'm very careful to not add too much water or scrub too hard, as this will break down the paper. I'm adding another dark shadow inside the cottage, cast from the witch this time from a secondary light source. Painting this in allows me to add nice definition around the children's heads so that they'll pop out a bit more. Another little hidden detail behind the door is this little character peeking out. Not sure if you've noticed him yet. At this point, I'm starting to add in some of the reflective light from the fire and add it to the hair, clothes, and skin on the witch and the kids as edge or halo light. And again, more color and value building as I'm adding transparent washes with more and more pigment to the illustration. To create shadows, I'll add a blue wash over the painting to give depth, as I'm doing here with the mushrooms. I'm adding a pretty strong color for the cinnamon bun, and I'll come in again later and add some darker color to create shadows and texture. Here you can see I'm mixing the Payne's gray with the yellow ochre and a touch of burnt sienna to create variations of the colors. I'm using this also for the darker shadows that are created on the bun by the icing dripping down. I'm then using a little bit of a darker version of this color to create the shadows and define the itty bitty orange mushrooms. I've gone into Gretel's hair and pulled out some of the paint to define it a little bit better. I'm going back in and darkening some of those areas to create a little more contrast as well. This part of the illustration was so rewarding to create. I want to show a hint of some of the witch's creepy things in the back of the cottage, subtly lit by the reflective light from the fire. So I'm going in again with a clean wet brush and pulling out some of the paint where I want to lightly define shapes and the reflected light. I go in later with a soft orange over some of the areas where I pulled out the paint, as they would reflect the color of the fire. Then of course I sign my name and I'm all done. So because this illustration sat for a while before I finished it, the tape left some of the glue residue on the paper. I'll have to see if I can get that off. Although this video is short, this painting took me a very long time to create. I'd be fully guessing as I didn't record my time, but I probably spent 30 hours on this painting altogether, maybe even longer. It was a lot of fun to create though. It's sort of my older style now, although I do always enjoy working in this highly rendered way. I get a lot of satisfaction of creating something completely from my imagination that I can see and almost feels real, especially for traditional fairy tale type illustrations like this one. I'm going to be launching new tiers on my Patreon soon, where I'll be doing monthly videos of painting processes like this, tutorials, color mixing, drawing sessions, behind the scenes, and more. There are a few free goodies on my Patreon now, and you can join as a free member if you'd like to get notified when I launch. I'll also be making this illustration available as a print. I'll add the details in the description. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a truly wonderful day. See you next time.